You knew this wouldn't work, Gerald. Your position here is untenable. My position is secure. Yours, however, is about to dissolve.
And just like that, it's over. I win, you lose. It really was that simple all along.
This new project is exactly what we needed. I really think this is going to change everything for us.
I agree completely. Don't worry about the logistics. I've got your back on this.
I've always been the kind of guy who plays by the rules. I did everything right. Worked hard, kept my head down, and rose through the ranks. I'd spent years proving myself, climbing the ladder one step at a time, earning trust, respect, and most importantly, loyalty. Or so I thought. That morning started like any other. I woke up to my usual routine, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and headed out the door to catch the subway. There was a sense of ambition in my chest, a buzz from knowing that today would be like every other day. But something felt different as I walked into the office. It was as if the air had shifted, and I couldn't put my finger on why. "Morning, Gerald," I greeted him as I passed his office. Gerald, my boss, looked up from his desk, a grin spreading across his face. "Morning, kid. You're on for the meeting today, right?" He asked casually, as if everything was normal. I nodded, forcing a smile. Gerald had always been more than just a boss to me. He was a mentor, a father figure in a way. He'd taken me under his wing when I first started, guiding me through the rough patches. He made me believe in the company, in the vision. Hell, I thought we were a team. The meeting came, and everything seemed fine at first. But then, during a routine discussion, something changed. I had been noticing discrepancies in our quarterly reports, numbers that didn't add up, decisions that didn't make sense. I had been keeping my mouth shut, letting the higher-ups handle things, but that day something snapped. "Gerald," I said, raising my hand. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at me. "I think there's something wrong with these numbers. We can't ignore this anymore. We've been pushing false data, and it could have serious consequences." Gerald's face tightened. His usual friendly demeanor melted into something colder, more calculating. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice taking on an edge. "The discrepancies in the quarterly reports. These figures don't add up, and we're misleading the board. I think we need to fix this before it blows up in our faces," I insisted. Gerald's eyes darkened, and for a split second, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a flicker of annoyance, maybe even contempt. But I was too far in to back out now. My integrity was on the line. "You think I don't know what I'm doing?" Gerald's voice was low, almost menacing. The room was silent. Everyone seemed to shrink back as if they could sense the storm brewing. I started, but he cut me off. "You don't get it, do you?" He stood up from his chair, and I could feel the power shift in the room. "This is how things are done here. We can't always play by the book. You want to go around questioning everything, fine, but don't ever do it in front of the team again." I stood frozen for a moment, staring at him. The words I had been holding back for so long felt like they were choking me. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about integrity, honesty, and everything I thought I believed in. I took a breath and said, I can't just stand by and pretend like nothing's wrong, Gerald. I'm not that guy. The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension. Gerald's gaze hardened as he leaned toward me, his tone colder than I had ever heard it. Maybe it's time for you to rethink where you stand. You're no longer valuable to this company, if that's the way you feel. I could feel the betrayal like a punch to my gut. He wasn't just dismissing my concerns, he was dismissing me. I had trusted him, believed in him, and now, here I was, standing in front of him, realizing that the man I thought of as a mentor had just decided I wasn't good enough. I can't believe this, I whispered. You're firing me over this? Gerald didn't hesitate. Yes. You're done here. I could feel the humiliation rise up in my chest. I had given everything to this place. Late nights, missed weekends, all for nothing. And now, in a single moment, it was over. My career, my future, everything I had worked for, all gone. As I walked out of that room, my heart felt like it had been ripped out. The people I had trusted, the ones I had fought for, were now just faceless figures. Gerald's betrayal stung worse than I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't ready to let it end this way. This wasn't just a firing. This was the beginning of something much darker. And I wasn't about to let it go. It's hard to describe the feeling of being fired, like everything you've worked for, everything you've sacrificed, is suddenly meaningless. The rush of confusion, the sting of betrayal, and the gnawing emptiness in your gut. That was my reality as I walked out of that conference room, head down, trying to pretend like it didn't hurt. But it did. It hurt more than I could have imagined. I don't remember how I got home that day. One moment, I was stepping out of the office building, still in disbelief, and the next, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the walls. There wasn't a single part of me that could process what had just happened. Lily, my best friend, kept texting me, her words full of concern, "You good? Call me when you get home." She knew how important that job had been to me. I didn't call her right away. I couldn't bring myself to. What was I supposed to say? That I was fired for doing the right thing? That I'd been betrayed by someone I trusted like a father? I didn't even know where to begin. Finally, after hours of sitting there in silence, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. "Hey, what happened?" Lily's voice was warm, but there was an edge of worry in it. I got fired." She was quiet for a second. "What? What do you mean? Why?" I stood up to Gerald. I called him out on the numbers. The reports, the discrepancies. He didn't like it, and he fired me. Just like that. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You're kidding me." "Nope," I muttered. "It's done." "Okay, don't freak out. We'll figure something out. You'll find something else. You've been at this job for so long, someone will see your value." But I knew she didn't get it. She didn't understand how deep it cut to be let go like that, especially by someone I had looked up to. "I don't care about finding another job right now," I snapped, the frustration finally spilling out. "It's not about that. It's about Gerald. I gave everything for him, for that company. And he just threw me away. I trusted him, Lily. I thought he cared about me." Lily's silence on the other end was heavy. "I know, I get it. But you're better than this. You're not some employee to be discarded. You'll bounce back." Her words should have been comforting, but they only made me angrier. I didn't want to hear about bouncing back. I wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, to tell her how humiliating it felt to be discarded like a used tissue. I wanted someone to understand. But I didn't know if I could even make her understand, or if I even wanted to. I ended the call quickly. I didn't want to hear any more pep talks. Days passed, but nothing seemed to change. The shock wore off, but the anger kept simmering beneath the surface. I didn't sleep much, barely ate. I had too many thoughts racing through my head, thoughts of revenge, thoughts of how to make Gerald regret what he'd done to me. It wasn't just about me losing my job, it was about everything I had lost because of him. I spent my days looking for work, applying to every company that had a vacancy, but it felt like a waste of time. There was no motivation to keep going. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just let this go. This wasn't a simple firing. It was a betrayal, a personal attack on my integrity. I needed a plan. That night, I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down Gerald's name. Beneath it, I wrote one word: revenge. It wasn't just about making him pay. It was about making sure he knew what it felt like to lose everything. I had been loyal to him, trusted him. And now, I was going to make him understand the consequences of his actions. I couldn't let this go. Not now, not ever. The next morning, as I stared at the paper with Gerald's name, I knew that whatever came next would change everything. It was time to stop being the victim and start playing the game on my own terms. I'd been awake for hours, staring at my phone, scrolling through job listings that all felt equally empty. It didn't matter how many companies I applied to. I knew deep down, none of them would replace what I had lost. It was more than just a job. It was my future, my ambition, my sense of purpose. And now, all of it felt hollow. The next few days were a blur. I spent hours sitting in my apartment, barely leaving, except to grab something to eat or go for a walk to clear my head. The world felt strange now. Like everything I once knew had shifted, and I was stuck trying to find my way through it. It was one of those walks that changed everything. I was pacing down the street when I bumped into him, Victor. My old mentor. "Kid? Is that you?" he called out. I turned, blinking in surprise. Victor. I hadn't seen him in over a year. "Victor? What are you doing here?" I asked, half-dazed from the intensity of the past few days. He grinned, a smile that had always been knowing. "I could ask you the same thing. You look like you've been hit by a truck." I snorted, despite myself. "I feel like I have." He raised an eyebrow, his tone shifting. "You look like you need a drink." Before I could protest, he started walking, and I found myself falling in step beside him. We made our way to a small bar a few blocks away, the kind of place that wasn't too loud but still felt like a proper escape. We grabbed a table, and Victor slid into the booth across from me. He didn't waste time asking about pleasantries. "So, what happened? You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." I chuckled bitterly. "I lost my job. Fired, actually." Victor's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to narrow in curiosity. "Fired? You? What the hell happened?" I took a deep breath and leaned back in the booth, staring into my drink. I stood up to Gerald. He's been making unethical decisions, and I called him out on it. Told him about discrepancies in the reports. I thought it was the right thing to do, but apparently, he didn't think so. Victor nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "Gerald, huh? Yeah, I should have seen that coming." My head snapped up. "You knew?" Victor gave a half-shrug. "Gerald's always been about one thing, himself. I don't mean to sound like a cynic, but corporate politics? It's a game. And the higher you go, the dirtier it gets." I felt a surge of anger at his casual tone. "So you're telling me that I should have just stayed quiet? Let him get away with everything?" He raised his hands, trying to calm me. "No, no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, in this game, standing up for what's right doesn't always lead to success. Sometimes, you get burned. That's exactly what happened, I muttered. Victor leaned forward, his eyes intense now. And that's where you're wrong. You're so focused on the fact that you lost, you're not seeing the opportunity. I blinked, confused. Opportunity? What the hell are you talking about? Victor leaned back in his seat and took a slow sip of his drink, letting the words settle. The thing about being fired, losing everything, it forces you to see things clearly. You're not stuck in the grind anymore. You have a chance to start fresh, to take control of your own future. And more importantly, you've learned the most valuable lesson of all. I felt my pulse quicken, but I wasn't sure where this conversation was going. What lesson? Power doesn't come from playing by the rules. It comes from understanding the game and knowing how to play it. You can either let this break you, or you can use it to get everything back. And then some. I stared at him, processing what he was saying. It wasn't just about finding a new job, or even making Gerald regret what he'd done. It was about playing the game the way it was meant to be played. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a shift inside me. Victor's eyes gleamed. I've got a few connections. People who know how to make things happen. If you're willing to play dirty, there's a lot you can do. You just have to decide if you want to fight or stay on the sidelines. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in days, hope. It was dangerous, but it was there. And for the first time since being fired, I felt like maybe I wasn't done. Maybe this was just the beginning. You're serious about this? I asked quietly. Victor smirked. Kid, I've been serious about this for years. I leaned back, letting the weight of his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe losing everything was the push I needed to finally take control. To make Gerald pay, not just for firing me, but for everything he had done to me and everyone else. I wasn't sure what I was about to get myself into, but I knew one thing, I wasn't going down without a fight. It was strange, really, how quickly things had shifted. Just a few weeks ago, I was a part of Gerald's world, contributing to his empire, believing in the company's mission. Now, I was alone, figuring out how to crawl my way back into something that resembled control. Victor had given me a glimpse into a world I hadn't fully understood before, one where the rules didn't matter unless you knew how to manipulate them. So, I started learning. I spent my days researching, reading books on corporate politics, making calls to people I once considered acquaintances. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. But then, something clicked. Victor had told me I had connections, he was right. I started using them. I reached out to former colleagues, people I'd worked with who were still in the game. Some of them were just as hungry for power as I was, and others, well, they had their own motives. But each one had something I could use. Charlotte was one of those people. I had met her a few years ago when we were both up and coming in the company. She had an ambition that was hard to ignore. She always knew how to play the game, how to get what she wanted without breaking a sweat. At the time, I'd thought she was just another overachiever, the type who'd do anything to get ahead. I hadn't realized how much I could learn from her. I ran into her at a networking event a few days later, of all places. She looked just like I remembered, confident, poised, and with a smile that could either charm you or freeze you in your tracks. You look like you've been through a war, Charlotte said, raising an eyebrow when she saw me. I gave her a half-smile. Something like that. She studied me for a moment, her eyes sharp. I heard what happened with Gerald. I nodded, not wanting to go into the details. Yeah. Didn't exactly work out the way I planned. She laughed softly, leaning closer. Nothing ever does it? But you seem like the kind of guy who doesn't quit. Am I right? I met her gaze. I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot. She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. Good. Because if you want to play this game, you're going to need to start thinking like the rest of us. Gerald won't be the last one to try to crush you. But if you learn how to turn the tables, you could take everything from him. And then some. That was the moment I realized how much I had to learn. I spent the next few weeks meeting with people, some useful, some not. But each conversation, each contact, brought me closer to the world I needed to enter. Charlotte became my unofficial mentor, teaching me how to play dirty without leaving any trace. She showed me how to manipulate situations, how to make people want to give you what you wanted, even if it wasn't in their best interest. At first, I hated the idea of doing anything underhanded. But as I spent more time with Charlotte, I began to see the appeal. If you didn't play this game, you were nothing. You couldn't just stand around waiting for opportunities to fall into your lap. You had to make them happen. My next step was to get back into the corporate world, big companies, the ones that still held power. I didn't care where I started, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. One afternoon, I got a call from Victor. "You're ready," he said, his voice steady. "I think so. I've got a lead on a position. Higher than you've ever been. But you'll need to be careful. People are watching. They know you were close to Gerald." I felt a thrill at the idea. This was it. The next chapter. I'll be careful. And when the time's right, I'll make Gerald regret everything he did. Victor paused for a moment before responding. "That's the spirit. But remember, revenge isn't just about getting back at someone, it's about making sure they never forget you." I didn't need to be told twice. I was already planning my next move, already setting the wheels in motion. This wasn't just about getting another job, this was about taking control. Gerald wasn't going to be the only one who played the game. I was ready to make my move. It didn't take long before things started to click into place. I'd done the hard part, learned the ropes, found the connections, and absorbed enough from Charlotte and Victor to navigate the corporate battlefield with a steady hand. What I hadn't expected, though, was how quickly my efforts would pay off. The position Victor had mentioned? It came through, but not in the way I thought it would. I was offered a management role at a fast-growing tech company. It wasn't the dream job, not yet, but it was the perfect stepping stone. The kind of opportunity you take, even if it's not everything you want, because it gets you closer to the goal. The first day felt surreal. I had to remind myself that this wasn't a temporary thing. This was my next chapter, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. As I walked through the glass doors of the office building, I felt the familiar mix of nervous excitement. It was like I was stepping into the unknown, but this time, I wasn't going to fail. Looking sharp, a voice called from behind me. I turned to find Michael, a guy I'd met at the networking event a few weeks ago. He worked in the same department, and I'd run into him a few times during the hiring process. He was one of the first people who actually made me feel like I could be a part of this world. "Thanks, man. I'm just trying not to screw it up." Michael laughed, slapping me on the back. "You'll be fine. You've got the right mindset. But hey, if you need anything, just let me know. I'm around." That's the thing about corporate culture, you had to build relationships, and fast. You couldn't afford to let anyone forget your name. Michael would be useful, but I couldn't get too comfortable. The first few weeks were a blur of meetings, reports, and trying to prove myself to the higher-ups. I quickly realized that the position wasn't going to be handed to me. I had to fight for it, just like I had to fight for everything else. But it wasn't the work that kept me up at night. It was the fact that Gerald had already made his presence felt. I had heard rumors about him from people at the company, about how he'd been pushing his influence in places I hadn't expected. It was subtle, but it was there. The more I learned about the company, the more I realized that it wasn't just about corporate politics, it was personal. Gerald wasn't just someone I needed to get past professionally. He was someone who had made it his mission to watch me fail. The moment I stepped into this company, I knew I had a target on my back. I spent a lot of nights thinking about what I needed to do. I wasn't just here to fill a role, I was here to take over. The problem was, I wasn't sure how to do that yet. Then, one afternoon, an opportunity landed right in my lap. "Hey, can you come to my office for a minute?" Charlotte asked over the phone. I hadn't heard from her in a few days, so the call caught me off guard. "Sure, I'll be right there." I walked into her office and sat across from her, trying to gauge what was going on. She seemed unusually serious. "I've got something that could work to your advantage," she said, closing the door behind me. "Something, what?" I asked, not sure where this was going. Charlotte leaned forward. "There's a position opening up in the executive team. A big one. If you want it, it's yours. But you'll have to move quickly." I couldn't believe it. "Wait, you're saying there's a chance to jump straight to the executive team?" She nodded. "The job's yours for the taking. But there's a catch. Gerald's influence is still everywhere. He's pulling strings behind the scenes, making sure people stay loyal to him. The higher up you go, the more you'll feel it." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. But Charlotte's next words made me pause. "You have to be prepared to fight for it. Nothing's going to be handed to you. If you want this, you'll have to play the game better than everyone else." I exhaled slowly, trying to wrap my head around the magnitude of what she was saying. It was more than just a job, it was the key to everything. "This could be the break I need," I said, my voice steady. "But what happens to Gerald?" Charlotte smiled, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Gerald? He'll fall, one way or another. But you'll have to be the one to make it happen. It's not about revenge, it's about taking what's yours." That was when I knew. I wasn't just here to take his job. I was here to take everything from him. This was my first victory. And it felt just as sweet as I'd imagined. The higher I climbed, the more I realized just how deep the game went. In the beginning, I'd been naive, thinking I could simply outwork everyone, proving myself to be better than the rest. But now, I understood that in this world, you didn't get ahead just by being good at your job, you got ahead by knowing exactly when to play dirty. Charlotte had been right about one thing: I needed to be prepared to fight for everything. The executive position I had been eyeing was finally within my reach, but it didn't come without complications. Gerald's influence was everywhere, people loyal to him, his old allies, were spread throughout the company. I could feel their eyes on me, watching my every move. I knew I had to be careful. But despite the challenges, I felt a growing sense of power. I had spent months learning the ropes, making alliances, and now, things were starting to align. I was on the cusp of something big, bigger than anything I'd ever dreamed of. Then, one day, everything changed. I was sitting in my office, reviewing a report, when I got a message from Charlotte. It was short, to the point: "Meet me at the usual spot. Now." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat and headed out to the cafe where we'd been meeting for weeks. When I walked in, I spotted Charlotte sitting in the corner, her face tight with frustration. She motioned for me to sit. "What's going on?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. She leaned in, her voice low. "There's something you need to know. And I don't know how to say this, but it's time you knew the truth." I frowned. "What truth?" Charlotte hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "Gerald's been playing you, and he's not just trying to destroy you professionally. He's going after your personal life, too. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I think you need to hear it. Gerald, he's been spreading rumors about you. About your character, your work ethic. He's trying to paint you as a liability, someone who can't be trusted. And he's using his influence to make sure it sticks. I sat back in my chair, the words sinking in like a stone in my stomach. Gerald? The man I had once called a mentor? The man who had practically been like a father to me? He was the one trying to destroy me, to tear down everything I had worked for? I felt a burning rage in my chest, but I couldn't let it show. Not yet. So, what do I do now? Charlotte looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. You fight back. I know you've got the drive to do it. But this time, it's going to be different. You can't play nice anymore. You need to expose Gerald for who he really is, and make sure the whole company sees it. We've got leverage. My mind raced as I tried to process what she was telling me. Leverage? She smiled darkly. Remember when you were looking for dirt on Gerald? I've been doing some digging on my own. Turns out, he's not as clean as he likes to appear. There are some things in his past that could ruin him. If we use it right, we can take him down for good. I felt a surge of excitement, but it was tempered by something else, doubt. I don't know, Charlotte. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be crossing a line. She met my gaze, her expression firm. There's always a line to cross. But if you want to win in this world, you have to be willing to make sacrifices. Gerald won't stop until he's destroyed you. The only way to take control is to take him down first. Her words echoed in my head, and for a moment I questioned everything. Was I really ready to go this far? To risk everything for revenge? But then I remembered what he had done to me, the betrayal, the humiliation. How easily he'd discarded me after everything I had done for him. My anger burned hotter. I'm in, I said, my voice steady. Let's take him down. Charlotte smiled, a dangerous, calculating smile. Good. Then let's get to work. And just like that, everything shifted. No more playing by the rules. No more waiting for opportunities to fall into my lap. This was it, the moment when I stopped being the victim and became the one who controlled the game. Gerald thought he had one. But he hadn't seen anything yet. It's funny how quickly the tables turn. A few months ago, I was just another guy in the trenches, trying to prove myself, working tirelessly for a company that didn't care about me. Now, I was holding the pieces of the puzzle that could finally take Gerald down. Every move I made was deliberate, calculated, and now the time had come to play my hand. Charlotte had been instrumental in helping me gather everything I needed. She wasn't just a colleague anymore, she was an ally, and we were in this together. I had the ammunition I needed to bring Gerald to his knees. It started small. Leaks. Subtle hints dropped into conversations. A slip-up here and there from the people loyal to him. Every piece of information I gathered made me stronger, made my resolve harder. The company, the employees, they had no idea what was about to hit them. But there was one thing I hadn't expected, how much I'd come to enjoy it. The power I now held felt intoxicating, like I was finally in control of something I had no say in before. I knew I was crossing lines, but each step forward felt like a victory. Each new piece of leverage was another nail in Gerald's coffin. The first real crack in Gerald's armor came one afternoon when I overheard a conversation between him and one of his senior managers, Bill. They were talking about the financial discrepancies, things I had once noticed but had been dismissed as nothing to worry about. Turns out, they weren't nothing. They were the key to everything. Gerald, you can't keep hiding this, Bill said, his voice low. The numbers, the bonuses, the offshore accounts, it's all going to come out eventually. Gerald's voice was cold, cutting through the tension. I've been careful. No one knows. We'll clean it up before it hits the board. And if anyone finds out, he paused, letting the threat hang in the air. We'll deal with it. My heart raced as I listened from the other side of the door, every word sinking in. This was it. This was the leverage I needed. If I exposed these financial discrepancies, it would destroy Gerald. Not just professionally, but personally. He was using his power to line his pockets at the company's expense. And now, I had the proof. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I kept my cool. I had to. Timing was everything. I couldn't afford to be reckless. The next morning, I walked into Charlotte's office, the file with all the information in my hand. I placed it on her desk, watching her face carefully as she scanned through it. She looked up, a small smile forming. This is it. This is what we need. I nodded. I know. But I'm not stopping there. We've got everything. Now we need to make sure it goes public. We need to make sure everyone knows exactly what Gerald's been doing. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. And you're sure? Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. I met her gaze, my voice steady. I've made my decision. He's taken everything from me. It's time to take him down. She leaned back in her chair, considering my words. Finally, she nodded. All right, let's do it. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and backdoor deals. It wasn't enough to just send the information out, we had to make sure it reached the right people, the people who could make Gerald's life hell. We used our connections, our influence, and soon enough, the entire company was buzzing with rumors. I knew Gerald could feel the heat. The panic was starting to set in. And that's when I did it. I sent the final email, an anonymous tip to the board of directors, exposing everything. I made sure to include every detail, the offshore accounts, the false reporting, everything. The fallout was immediate. It didn't take long for the board to start investigating. Gerald's empire, which he had so carefully built, started to crumble piece by piece. Employees were talking. The media picked up on it. The stories began to surface, the headlines screaming of his corruption. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. But at the same time, there was a part of me that couldn't quite enjoy it. Maybe it was the realization that, in bringing Gerald down, I had become a part of the same game he had played. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was done. His influence was shattered. The company was no longer his to control. And just like that, the man who had betrayed me, the man who had fired me without a second thought, was gone. I'd won. I stood in front of the glass wall of my office, staring at the city skyline that sprawled beneath me. The hustle of the streets felt distant now, far below my feet. It was almost surreal, the view, the power, the control. It all seemed like something I had once only dreamed about. I had done it. Gerald was finished. The company was mine for the taking. The seat I'd worked so hard for was now comfortably warm beneath me, and the people who had once doubted me now looked to me for leadership. But something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I didn't feel the victory I thought I would. I'd achieved everything I set out to do. Gerald had been brought to his knees. He had lost it all, his job, his reputation, his power. And I had taken his place. But now, sitting in the same office where he once ruled, I felt no joy. I leaned against the desk, my fingers tracing the edge of the polished wood. The smell of fresh coffee in my mug seemed distant, disconnected. I hadn't had a moment to process everything. The hours, the late nights, the risks I had taken, it all felt like a blur. The phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. "Mr. Blackwell, you have a call from the board," my assistant said. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, I'll take it." The voice on the other end was smooth, calculated, just like I remembered. "Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwell." "Congratulations on your recent success," the voice said, dripping with thinly veiled insincerity. "We've been following your progress closely. The board's impressed." I straightened up, suddenly alert. "Thank you. What's this about?" "We'd like to discuss the future, your vision for the company moving forward," the voice continued. "We think it's time we had a serious conversation about where things are headed under your leadership." My stomach tightened. There it was again, that feeling. The sense that everything I had worked for, everything I had gained, was somehow slipping away. The board wasn't impressed. They were calculating. They were already thinking about how to use me, how to control me. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the wave of unease that was rising in my chest. "I'll be happy to meet with you. Let's set something up for next week." The conversation ended, and I was left with a sinking feeling. I had climbed the ladder, taken the seat I had long desired, but now, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. It wasn't just about the company or the job anymore. It was about what I had become in the process. The hunger for revenge had consumed me. The desire to get back at Gerald had clouded my judgment, and now, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I walked over to the window again, watching as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one. I had won the war, but at what cost? I thought about Gerald. The man I once admired, who had become nothing more than a cautionary tale. But in taking him down, had I become something else? Had I sacrificed my soul in the process? The answer hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that office months ago. I was hardened, cynical, and driven by a thirst for power. But in my pursuit of that power, I had lost myself. It wasn't just Gerald I had defeated, it was the person I used to be. The man who cared about right and wrong, about integrity and honesty. That man was gone, replaced by someone who would do whatever it took to win. For a moment, I allowed myself to think back on who I used to be, the man who had once been fired, humiliated, and betrayed. That man had a sense of justice, a sense of purpose that was now almost foreign to me. But was it too late to find him again? Could I reclaim that version of myself, the one who believed in more than just power and revenge? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing, I couldn't keep going down this path. The game I had been playing had consumed me, and if I wasn't careful, it would destroy me too. Maybe it was time to make a change. Not just in the company, but in myself. To rebuild who I had become, piece by piece. And as I sat in the quiet of my office, staring out at the city, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this victory define me. I wasn't going to be the man I had become. It was time to find redemption, before it was too late. Power is a strange thing. At first, it feels like a dream, a shining, elusive prize that promises everything you've ever wanted. But the more you gain, the heavier it becomes. The more people look to you for decisions, for answers, for direction, the more it starts to feel like a weight you can never set down. I was learning that the hard way. The days blurred into one another, filled with meetings, decisions, and a constant stream of people coming to me for guidance. I had everything I thought I wanted, the corner office, the respect, the influence, but it didn't feel like victory anymore. It felt like a responsibility that threatened to crush me. I spent my nights tossing and turning, my mind racing with the choices I'd made, wondering if I had truly won or simply become another cog in a machine that was slowly eating away at me. I had destroyed Gerald, but in doing so, I had also become something I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. I had been so focused on getting back at him, on taking his job and his power, that I had never stopped to consider what that power would do to me. The man I was becoming didn't care about right or wrong. He only cared about winning, about maintaining control, about making sure no one could ever hurt me again. But in that, I had lost sight of who I truly was. One evening, as I sat in my office, staring at the glass of whiskey in my hand, I got a call from Charlotte. I hadn't heard from her in a few days. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the exhaustion from my voice. "What's up?" There was a brief pause before she responded. "We need to talk." I knew what she meant. She could sense it, the same thing I had been feeling for weeks. She knew I was losing myself in the process, just as I had feared. "I'm listening," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "There's something you need to think about," she said, her tone serious. "You've got everything you've ever wanted, but at what cost? You're not the same person you were when we first started this." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known it, but hearing it from her made it real. "You're right," I admitted, sinking deeper into the chair. "I don't know who I am anymore. I used to care about doing the right thing, about standing up for what was right. But now, it's like I've become someone else. I can't even recognize myself." Charlotte was quiet for a long time. "You've been so focused on Gerald, on making him pay for what he did to you, that you've stopped thinking about what comes next. The game isn't over. It's just begun, and now you're the one holding the reins. But you need to remember why you're doing this. You need to find a reason to keep going that isn't about revenge, because that will destroy you." I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can change that, Charlotte. I've spent too long fighting for this." "You can," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But you have to decide if it's worth the cost. If the power you've gained is worth losing everything you used to believe in." Her words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. I sat there, staring out the window, watching the lights flicker below. It was strange, but in that moment, I felt more alone than I had ever felt before. I had won. I had everything I thought I wanted. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing myself in the process. For the first time since this all began, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What was I really after? Was it the power? The revenge? The position? Or was it something else? Something I had long forgotten in the pursuit of winning? I had spent so long focusing on Gerald's downfall that I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted out of all of this. What was the point of becoming the man I had become if it meant losing the core of who I was? I wasn't sure if I had the answers yet, but I knew I couldn't keep going down this path without figuring it out. The price of power had already cost me so much. If I wasn't careful, it was going to cost me everything. I took a deep breath, setting the whiskey glass down. There was work to be done, but it wasn't the kind of work I had been doing. This time, I was going to have to do some real soul-searching. The power I held now wasn't the prize, it was the challenge. The challenge of holding on to who I was while navigating a world that demanded I sacrifice everything for success. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what I would find at the end of this journey. But I was ready to find out. I had spent months building my empire. Months of strategizing, calculating, and executing a plan that, in the end, had destroyed Gerald and left me standing in his place. It wasn't the glorious victory I had imagined. Instead, it felt like I was standing in the middle of a battlefield, surrounded by the remnants of everything I had torn down to get here. I had everything I thought I wanted: power, influence, control. But somewhere along the way, I lost the person I used to be. The man who had once believed in integrity, in fighting for what was right, was now just a shadow of who I was. I had won, but I had also lost. The weight of it all settled on me in ways I hadn't expected. Each decision I made felt heavier, each responsibility more suffocating. I had replaced Gerald, but I hadn't replaced the emptiness I felt inside. The victory didn't feel sweet anymore, it felt hollow. I spent a lot of time alone in my office, staring out at the city skyline, wondering where I went wrong. There were days when the pressure seemed too much, when I questioned if I could keep up this charade. But the hardest part was confronting the truth. I had let myself become just like the man I had sworn to defeat. It wasn't just about the company or the job anymore. It was about what I had become in the process. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that the success I had worked so hard for meant anything when it came at the cost of my soul. One evening, I walked into the office building as the sun was setting. The lights were dim, the hallways quiet. I made my way to the top floor, to my office, and sat down in the chair behind the desk where Gerald once sat. The city lights flickered on below, and I let out a long breath. It was time. I grabbed my phone and called Charlotte. "Hey, I need to meet with you," I said, my voice steady but filled with an urgency I couldn't shake. "Of course," she replied, her tone immediately shifting to one of concern. "Is everything all right?" "I don't know. But I need to talk." We met at a small cafe we both frequented, a quiet place where we could talk without the weight of corporate walls around us. Charlotte sat across from me, watching me carefully as I placed my hands on the table. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with genuine concern. "I'm done," I said, the words feeling heavier than I expected. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep holding on to power if it's going to destroy me." Charlotte looked at me with a mixture of relief and understanding. "You're finally seeing it, aren't you? I think I've known all along." I was so focused on taking Gerald down, on proving I was better than him, that I lost sight of who I was. I became someone I'm not proud of. She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "It's not too late to change. You don't have to keep walking this path." I let her words sink in, feeling the weight lift from my chest. "I'm stepping down. I'm going to start over, rebuild the company, rebuild myself. I want to do it right this time." Charlotte smiled, the warmth in her expression reminding me of the person I had once been. "You don't have to do it alone. We'll do it together." I nodded, grateful for her support. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the only way forward. I had spent too long letting anger and revenge guide my every step. It was time to reclaim my life and my purpose. As I left the cafe that night, a sense of clarity washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path. I wasn't going to let the mistakes of my past define me. I wasn't going to let power blind me to what truly mattered. There was a long road ahead, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. This wasn't just about redemption for Gerald, it was about redemption for me. And I wasn't going to let myself fall into the same traps that had led me here in the first place. I had learned the hard way that the price of power was too high. But now, I was ready to pay the price for something better: for peace, integrity, and a chance to rebuild. And that, I realized, was worth everything.